There was a time when logging into a game felt like arriving somewhere. Not loading a match, not queuing for a session. Arriving at a world that existed whether you were there or not, with thousands of other people living inside it simultaneously. People who knew your name, who remembered what you did last week, who showed up at the same time every night, because that's just what you did. This is the era when MMORPGs ruled gaming, and what it actually felt to live inside it. Before MMORPGs, there were MODs, multi-user dungeons. Text-based, no graphics, just words describing a world, and other players moving through it in real time. The first MOD was created in 1978 by Roy Trapshaw and Richard Bartle at University of Essex. Players typed commands: go north, attack goblin, take sword, and the server responded with text descriptions. Hundreds of players could exist simultaneously in the same text space. MODs established every foundational concept that MMORPGs would later inherit. Persistent worlds, player interaction, character progression, guild structures, player versus player combat. The vocabulary of online role-playing was written in text on university servers a decade before commercial games existed. Neverwinter Nights, the AOL game, not the BioWare RPG, launched in 1991 as the first graphical online RPG. It ran on America Online at $6 per hour of playtime. At its peak, it had approximately 115,000 registered players and was shut down in 1997 when the pricing model became unsustainable. Meridian 59 launched in 1996, the first internet-distributed graphical 3D online RPG. It introduced the monthly subscription model that would define the genre for the next 2 decades. The transition from text MUDs to graphical MMORPGs required 3 technological conditions to align. First, broadband internet becoming accessible to home users. Dial-up connections existed, but the bandwidth required for real-time graphical worlds was at the edge of what was feasible. Second, 3D rendering hardware becoming affordable for home PCs. The mid-1990s saw graphic cards capable of rendering the persistent 3D environments MMORPGs needed. Third, server infrastructure capable of handling thousands of simultaneous connections reliably. A significant technical challenge that early MMOs solved imperfectly, but sufficiently. The players who found Meridian 59 and the early graphical online games in 1996 and 1997 were pioneering something with no cultural template. There was no established language for what it meant to have a persistent character in a persistent world, to log in and find that the world had continued while you were away. In September 1997, that world got significantly larger. Ultima Online launched, and the modern MMORPG era began. Ultima Online launched September 25, 1997. Developed by Origin Systems, the studio behind the Ultima single-player RPG series. It brought Richard Garriott's Britannia into a persistent online world for the first time. Ultima Online reached 100,000 subscribers within 6 months of launch, the first online RPG to break that threshold. At its peak in 2003, Ultima Online had approximately 250,000 active players, a number that seems modest by later standards, but represented a genuinely new scale of online community in 1997. The game was built around player freedom to a degree nothing before it had attempted. Players could own houses, physical structures placed in the game world that others could visit. The economy was player-driven. Crafters made items, merchants sold them, adventurers bought them. Player versus player combat was open across most of the world, and the emergent consequences of that system, including player-run criminal organizations and elaborate social hierarchies, were something no design document had anticipated. EverQuest launched March 16, 1999, developed by Sony's 989 Studios. A 3D fantasy world with a fully realized geography, multiple continents, dozens of zones, a faction system connecting every NPC group in the world. EverQuest subscribers base surpassed Ultima Online with its first year, reaching approximately 430,000 subscribers at its peak around 2003, before WoW's launch began drawing players away. EverQuest's design philosophy was built around difficulty as community glue. Group combat was effectively mandatory. Most zones and all endgame content required coordinated parties of 6 players. That had consequences. Players dropped their equipped items on death, requiring recovery missions to retrieve them. Travel was slow and difficult. No mounts initially, no fast travel. Navigating between continents required player-run boat services. Camp spawns created contested resource points, where guilds competed for rare monsters. Every design friction created social necessity. You needed other people to survive, to progress, to recover from failure. EverQuest players describe the experience with a specific vocabulary that has no equivalent in modern gaming. Camping a spawn for 6 hours with a group you'd never met, becoming close enough to coordinate a complex raid together, logging off knowing those people would be back to borrow. That friction wasn't a flaw. It was the mechanism through which community formed. By 2001, the MMORPG was an established genre. Multiple games were in development. The question wasn't whether the format worked. The question was whether anyone could build a world large enough for the audience that was coming. In November 2004, someone answered. World of Warcraft launched November 23, 2004, and it did something no MMORPG before it had managed. It made the genre accessible without making it shallow. WoW reached 1 million subscribers within its first month in North America alone. By the end of 2005, 6 million worldwide. By January 2008, 10 million. Peak subscribers reached 12 million in October 2010. At $14.99 per month, 12 million subscribers represented approximately $180 million in monthly recurring subscription revenue. WoW didn't just dominate the MMORPG market, it redefined what the market was. The other major titles of the era existed alongside it. Final Fantasy VI in 2002, Square Enix's MMORPG, notable for its challenging group-focused design and its position as one of the first cross-platform MMORPGs between PS2 and PC. It reached approximately 500,000 subscribers at peak. RuneScape in 2001, Jagex's browser-based MMORPG built around 23 separate skills, each leveled through use. Free-to-play with optional membership. By 2007, it had grown to approximately 10 million registered accounts and 1 million playing members, accessible to players who couldn't afford dedicated gaming hardware. EVE Online in 2003, a space-based MMO with a fully player-driven economy, territorial warfare, and political structures that generated real-world news coverage, reached approximately 500,000 subscribers by 2013. WoW's structural innovations over EverQuest were deliberate and specific. Quest-driven progression replaced camp spawning. Players always had directed objectives. Death penalties were minimized. A small durability loss on equipment rather than item drops. Instance dungeons removed competition for group content. Your group got their own copy of the dungeon. A clear progression path. Leveling, then dungeons, then raids, gave players a structured journey. The auction house replaced directly player trading with a centralized economy. WoW made the genre navigable without making it trivial. The endgame, particularly the 40-player raid content of Vanilla and the Burning Crusade, demanded genuine coordination and skill. but the path to that endgame was no longer a gauntlet designed to filter out casual players. The WoW era produced a specific type of social infrastructure that has never been replicated at the same scale. Guild raids scheduled on Tuesday and Thursday nights. Ventrilo and TeamSpeak coordinating 40 people simultaneously. Players who had never met in person attending each other's weddings. The Corrupted Blood incident of 2005. An in-game plague that escaped its intended zone and spread through the entire server population. Later studied by epidemiologists as a model for real-world disease behavior. WoW wasn't just a game people played, it was a place people lived in. And then every major publisher in the world looked at 12 million subscribers at $14.99 per month and decided they needed one. The WoW clone era had arrived, and it would produce almost nothing that lasted. Between 2006 and 2012, every major publisher attempted to build the next World of Warcraft. Almost none succeeded. Age of Conan in 2008, Funcom's mature-rated MMORPG, strong launch of approximately 700,000 boxes sold, severe content gaps past the starting zone drove rapid player attrition within months. Warhammer Online, Age of Reckoning in 2008, EA's mythic RVR-focused MMORPG, launched to approximately 800,000 subscribers, lost half of its population within 3 months due to endgame content issues and server population imbalances, shut down permanently in 2013. Star Wars: The Old Republic in 2011, BioWare's story-focused MMORPG, estimated at $200 million in development costs, the most expensive game ever made at the time, launched to over 1 million subscribers, dropped to approximately 500,000 within months, and transitioned to free-to-play in 2012. Guild Wars 2 in 2012. ArenaNet's buy-to-play MMORPG with no subscription fee, sold over 3 million copies in its first year and remains active in 2026 with a dedicated player base, one of the few WoW-era competitors to find long-term stability. The pattern across failed WoW competitors revealed a structural problem none of them solved. WoW had years of content by the time each competitor launched. A new MMORPG, shipping with 3 months of endgame, couldn't compete with a world players had invested years building characters inside. The switching cost, leaving your guild, your character, your history, was enormous. Simultaneously, the broader gaming landscape was shifting. Free-to-play games were demonstrating that the subscription model was losing its hold. Battle Royale and hero shooter genres were offering competitive social experiences without the time investment MMORPGs demanded. WoW's own subscription numbers tracked the shift, from 12 million in 2010 to 7.7 million by mid-2013, continuing to decline through the decade. The WoW clone era produced a generation of players who tried multiple games and found nothing that replicated what WoW has been at its peak. The experience of discovery, of arriving in a world for the first time with no knowledge of what was there, could only happen once per player per world. The MMORPG era was built on that first arrival, and once players had arrived everywhere, the sense of discovery couldn't be manufactured again. But the genre didn't disappear, it contracted, and in contracting found something more durable than mass appeal. The MMORPG didn't die, it found its audience, and stopped trying to be everything to everyone. World of Warcraft, the game that had defined the genre's peak, never stopped being its market leader. After declining from 12 million subscribers in 2010 to approximately 5.5 million when Blizzard stopped publishing subscriber data in 2015, WoW reversed course. Approximately 7.25 million subscribers were confirmed as of Q1 of 2024. the first verified figure in nearly a decade. Early 2026 estimates place the number between 8 and 9 million across all versions: Retail WoW, WoW Classic and Season of Discovery, with WoW's return to China contributing significantly to that recovery. WoW generated an estimated of $680 million in revenue in 2024, up 12% year over year, with the Warcraft franchise earning approximately $15 billion in lifetime revenue through 2025. The War Within in 2024 received 97% critic recommendation on OpenCritic and was widely considered the strongest expansions since Wrath of the Lich King. WoW Midnight launched March 2, 2026, continuing the World Soul Saga trilogy. Final Fantasy XIV, A Realm Reborn in 2013, became one of gaming's most remarkable recovery stories. The original launched in 2010 to catastrophic reception, so poor that Square Enix shut it down, rebuilt it entirely, and relaunched it in 2013. By 2026, it had grown to over 42 million registered accounts, WoW's closest long-term competitor, and one of the most respected MMORPGs in the genre's history. Old School RuneScape, a 2013 restoration of RuneScape's 2007 version, grew consistently through the 2020s. In August 2025, it set a new all-time concurrent player record of 240,756 players. A 20-year-old game breaking its own peak in 2025. EVE Online maintained its player base through consistent development, its player-driven political and economic conflicts continuing to generate mainstream news coverage into the 2020s. The surviving MMORPGs share a structural characteristic that the failed WoW clones lacked. They stopped competing for the mass audience and built deeply for their specific communities. Two further titles illustrate the different paths through this period. The Elder Scrolls Online launched in 2014, transitioning to buy-to-play in 2015, reached over 21 million registered accounts by 2020. IP recognition carried it to an audience traditional fantasy settings couldn't reach alone. Black Desert Online, launched globally in 2016, represented a different direction entirely. Action combat replacing tab targeting, a Korean free-to-play model, and visual fidelity that pushed the genre's technical ceiling forward. With an estimated several hundred thousand monthly active players in 2026, it demonstrated that a committed audience existed for MMORPGs built on fundamentally different design principles than WoW had established. WoW invested in the World Soul Saga, a multi-expansion narrative roadmap giving players reasons to stay across years. Final Fantasy XIV invested in story and community culture. Old School RuneScape invested in player-driven development through community polls on every major content edition. EVE invested in simulation depth. None of them are trying to replicate what WoW was in 2008, and that restraint is precisely why they're still there. The era when MMORPGs ruled gaming was specific and unrepeatable. It existed in the window between the internet becoming accessible enough to support persistent worlds and the fragmentation of gaming into dozens of competing formats that divided the attention the genre once commanded entirely. That window closed somewhere around 2010. What remained was a genre with a dedicated audience, smaller than the peak, but more committed than almost anything else in gaming, and led still by the same game that defined it 20 years ago. From text commands on a university server in 1978 to 12 million people living inside Azeroth simultaneously in 2010. The MMORPG era was built on a single idea: that a world shared with other people is worth more than a world experienced alone. Ultima Online proved the idea could work. EverQuest proved it would scale. World of Warcraft proved it could reach everyone. And the decade after WoW proved that reaching everyone doesn't mean keeping them. The era when MMORPGs ruled gaming lasted roughly from 1997 to 2010, not because the games got worse, but because the conditions that made them feel like the only place to be, the novelty, the discovery, the shared arrival in a world nobody had mapped yet, could only exist once. And that's what made it worth remembering.